Today on Lynn's Warriors, we are joined by a powerful voice in the national fight to protect children, families, and all people from exploitation. Christen Price, Senior Legal Counsel at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation in Washington, D.C., is one of the leading attorneys shaping the legal and policy battles against trafficking, pornography, and the corporate systems that profit from harm. In her role at NCOSE, again, everybody, that is the National Center on Sexual, Christen works to influence courts and legislatures towards protecting human dignity and equality on behalf of sexual exploitation survivors through legislative advocacy, litigation, and providing support to other attorneys, especially with respect to sex trafficking, prostitution, child sexual abuse, pornography, and so much more. Christen represents what this movement needs more of: courage, clarity, and a deep commitment to putting human dignity above corporate convenience. We're honored to have Christen back on the Warriors to help us understand today this just released National Declaration on Survivors' Right to Anonymity and Safety. The website is endsexualexploitation.org. And I'm proud to welcome back Christen Price. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you, Lynn, for having me.
I'm so happy to always have you because you explain things so well. And I'm going to start off with you're a legal warrior, and we're going to dig in now, but I want to make sure I get that in there. You are such an advocate and working so hard on behalf of so many people. Let's talk about this declaration. You're going to explain what it is, and it marks a powerful moment about, what does the gap, the Survivor Declaration, Anonymity, and Safety fill in the current legal and cultural landscape. Let's talk about the survivors. I'm jumping around. I do that a little bit. What does it fill in for them? And why did the survivors, because you had, 92 of them sign on to this? Why did they want to? So the floor is yours. Explain what this is and why they wanted to participate in this.
Survivors wanted to let people know the enormous cost of coming forward for them. There's a big cost to coming forward if you do so as a Jane Doe, but there's an enormous cost if you do so under your own name. And they wanted to explain to people, this is what it costs us. This is what we live with. These are the kinds of risks that we live with because of our trauma, because of what was done to us. So that's the purpose of the declaration.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the public, they just don't really understand. This is not easy at all to put your face, put your name, because you suffer a lot of consequences. We've seen that through these very, I don't want to say well-known, but they are, what the media jumps on, whether it's Diddy, Epstein, the price a lot of them have paid, and that trickles down to all of these cases. So we're going to get into that. Explain this lawsuit that's going on and also what's happening in Nevada. And I'll tell you why I'm asking you this. I get a lot of questions. If I bring up the state of Nevada, they're like, oh, prostitution is legal there. What are you talking about? They don't understand that entire landscape. So give us a whole kind of briefing on what's going on there.
Yeah, so the case is about prostitution in Nevada, which you're correct. In the rural counties, brothel prostitution is legal. So you have to be in a brothel. You can't be independent. Your license is only as good as the brothel that you're in. So if you leave, you have to get another one, pay for that. And it's quite an abusive system where sex trafficking just kind of occurs all the time, not only because a lot of the women that are in these legal brothels might have pimps or external traffickers, but they're trafficked by the brothels themselves. So just by way of general practice, the brothels take 10% of what these women make from the sex buyers off the top. Then on top of that, they charge the women for room and board. They charge them for fees for the required doctor's exams every single week for STIs. They fine them for even really stupid things. They fine them for if they're late to the lineup when the sex buyer arrives in the brothel. One of the brothels we sued, you could be fined $1,500 for missing that lineup, being late to it. So they have this whole abusive system of fees and fines and things they're taking out. And so as a consequence, a lot of times women end up in debt to the brothel and they can't leave till they pay the debt off. It's completely illegal, absolutely a form of trafficking. Forced fraud, coercion, plus prostitution is trafficking under federal law. And then on top of that, almost all the brothels that I've heard people's accounts of do not let the women come and go. They are locked inside for 2 weeks at a time. They don't have any access to the gate code. They don't have the key. They can't get out. So that's legal brothel prostitution in Nevada. That's the situation. Rife with trafficking. Government does nothing. The state and local government just permits this.
I'm completely horrified by everything you just said, because you described, and this is, I think, what the public, our warriors need to hear. This isn't just of will. I mean, you outlined it when you're saying, basically locked in. I've seen pictures with like fences and gates around
Barbed
these
wire.
places.
One of
Barbed
the brothels
wire.
was sued. You can look on Google Maps. Chicken Ranch had barbed wire around it.
I mean, this is just the explanation of torture, kidnapping, trafficking, exploitation, and then, as you pointed out, trying to leave, and they can't. They're indebted. So people have to understand this is inherently, it's so dangerous, prostitution. I am so tired, Christen, of people saying, oh, oldest profession, and laughing in my face because it's the oldest oppression. I mean, I stole that from somebody, but it's true, the oldest
Very
oppression. And people have to really understand about all of this. Let's talk about the lawsuit. What can you share with us? You shared a little bit about, but what do you hope to really achieve other than complete change with all of this? And how did you really get? We talked a little bit about, survivors, victims are afraid to come forward, right? But they signed on to this. So obviously their names are on it, correct?
No. So
So their names are
survivors,
not on it.
yes.
So,
So let me, if I can clarify a little bit, the lawsuit versus the declaration.
okay.
So the lawsuit is on behalf of a Jane Doe who sued the brothels that trafficked her, and then the government officials that were licensing and regulating the brothels and profiting from what they were doing. And one of her traffickers, one of the pimps who owns the Mustang Ranch brothel, at the time that she was in it, he was the county commissioner, one of three of the county where the brothel was located. So he was essentially regulating himself. And so there are obviously, implications of official corruption and things like that there. So she's filed this lawsuit under the federal statute that prohibits perpetrating trafficking, but then also benefiting from it against these brothels and the government entities. She also filed a motion. This is something we do in all of our cases to proceed as a Jane Doe and under a protective order. The court denied that, said you have 15 days to go fully public with your name, your legal name, everything, or I'm dismissing the case. So the case was dismissed. We are appealing that. And in conjunction with our appeal, these 92 survivors from around the country, and I think even a few internationally, are speaking out against just the really horrible decision that we got denying her the right to proceed as a Jane Doe, to emphasize how important it is for survivors to have these protections. And if they want to come forward under their own name, that it really has to be on their terms when they're ready.
Let me ask you something. I mean, the wording emphasizes. Why do you think everything you're telling me makes perfect, common sense? Why victims, survivors don't want to come forward? We know what has been done to people, lives ruined, trauma, all of that. Seriously, why is it so controversial? Like, why is this so hard for people, in your opinion, to understand?
It really shouldn't be controversial, but I think you're exactly right. I think that in most cases, this is a protection that is granted to survivors of sex trafficking at the very least. It's not uncommon for it to also be granted to survivors of sexual assault and some of these other types of civil rights violations where the information that would come out in the lawsuit can be quite personal, quite sensitive, potentially embarrassing if it became kind of public knowledge. And it's really reflective of the law in some sense evolving, in response to what frankly is an almost universal cultural norm to blame women for the things that men do to them. And it provides a kind of protection, giving someone Jane Doe status that limits the effect of that. It doesn't eliminate it, because even coming forward, you still have to face the abuser that you're suing. You still have to deal with them. They're still going to know who you are at some point in the case. So it's actually a pretty established norm in the law, in particularly anti-sex trafficking litigation, that the people who come forward and bring these cases can proceed under a pseudonym. And the judge just kind of departed, as best we can tell, from the normal practice. And what's, I think, especially disturbing about that is that in our case, the defendants had already indicated that they wanted to harass her. The very first thing they filed in court before we ever served them with a lawsuit was a motion trying to force her to reveal her name, basically saying anyone who would dare to challenge our legal system of prostitution should be prepared to do so under her own name.
So they went in there prepared to unleash whatever they are doing, this horror. What is that process, may I ask, for the declaration gathering up, 92 survivors? Like, it's just through networking, outreach, through survivors and other survivors, because 92 is a lot.
That's exactly good. That. Networking, outreach, allies, survivor leaders we've worked with.
Yeah, hard work to get, right. But I do know, working with survivors, like, they do want to speak out about all this injustice. They do want accountability. They do want a big shout out. I mean, everything we do at the Warriors is in the name of empowering victims and supporting survivors and believing them. So that's kind of what I like to pass around to everybody listening. Let me ask you, if parents are listening to this, I want to switch it up just a little bit for you. What do you want to share with them about teens and kids being vulnerable? We're talking about this. And look, let's be honest, Christen. I don't think in my lifetime, your lifetime, we are going to end this exploitation, this trafficking. It's too big. It's making too much money. But what we can do is constantly raise awareness and get in there and intervene and do prevention, right? And just keep raising our voices, coming to, there's power in numbers. We got to get into, warning more parents about kids and what's happening right now. So if we have I know we have parents and a lot of grandparents listen to us. What would you want to say to them? Kind of relate what's going on now, the case you're working on, all of this with kids and the parents, if that makes some kind of sense.
I think the first thing I would say to them is, I'm sorry. This is an incredibly tough landscape. It's a very tough situation for parents and kids right now, because the reality is that a lot of kids are exposed to these different things through AI chatbots. They're experiencing sextortion. We're seeing the rise of deepfake pornography, which like some 99% of it features women and girls. Obviously, like the mass online harassment, doxing, all these kinds of things. Like, I think we all know just the different dangers that come from the technological landscape and the way that young people are so immersed in it, and the way that the big tech lobby has resisted any kind of reform. And unlike normal companies that have to pay something, at least in damages, if they create a product that's harmful, that's unsafe, these tech companies have had the benefit of immunity from a nearly 30-year-old statute that's been expansively interpreted by judges. That means they're very, very, very difficult to sue. So they've never had to factor in they've been able to externalize essentially all the costs of their products and the harms that those are creating. And so that's the situation. We are promoting different legislative solutions, as well as obviously litigating some of these cases to push back on that. But I think the best advice I could give to parents in this environment, beyond just staying aware of these things, is making sure that you're having these conversations with your kids and that you're setting limits on how they can use tech. There's just not really, right now that's just absolutely necessary because of how these products are affecting kids.
Yeah, and we have all these studies and stats now and things coming forward, how online, all of it, too extensive to even list, mental health, everything. It's a crime scene online, although we live in a digital world. We're not giving it up. So let's leverage the internet for good and keep talking about it. I think one of the most important things is also, really putting guardrails. Parents and guardians have to dig in and really take the time to understand these things are happening. But I also think, Kristen, like number one thing you mentioned, you have to talk to your kids. They're seeing so much online these days. Like they're savvy, they're aware. You have to have the open lines of communication. Um, you've worked on so many legal fronts, legislative, policy. I'm going to ask you a question, answer any way you see fit. Do you think this declaration, um, do you think it has teeth? Do you think, we keep hitting hurdles? Now, I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer or negative. I am tired of big tech ruling the roost and things like this. We're talking about exploiting people. I really don't understand what's so tough for everybody to understand about all of this, right? Except there's a lot of money being made all around. What do you think? What's the next steps with this?
Well, because we've appealed the decision below, the trial court's decision, we've just finished briefing that, and the brief is linked, I think, in our press statement about the declaration. So it's actually now up to the appeals court what happens in the case and whether they're going to let this terrible decision stand as precedent. Which, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned this already or not, but the judge essentially said that the reason it was rejecting our request for pseudonym and a protective order was basically because it was going to make it too hard for these brothels to defend themselves in the media.
No, and I'm glad you didn't mention that earlier because that makes me very,
It's
very,
enraging.
it's the most ridiculous, outrageous statement for an officer of the court. You know what I
Yes.
mean? It's, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just saying that, but you are. So,
There's a legal standard for how you evaluate these things. It's basically what's the person's interest in privacy. In this case, it's very high because of the physical risk, the trauma, all of that. What's the public's interest in knowing the person's name? And then what is the prejudice to the defendants, if any, in not having the name be public? And the court basically said, yeah, it's too prejudicial to the defendants. I just don't, for myself, I don't understand what exactly is like the reputation that a brothel has to lose in this specific case, but also how on earth do you weigh that above somebody's life, somebody's physical safety, somebody's right to hold their abusers to account?
I mean, you just outlined it. I mean, what about the victims, right? What about the women, the girls, and maybe there's some men and boys too in some of these brothels, probably somewhere, right? What about their rights? What about their images? What about them? It always seems to me,
Exactly.
Kristen, again, I'm not a lawyer, it's always with the criminal element, all everything's put on, their image or their stigma and things like that. It's like full decrim, which we're fighting here constantly in New York City, New York State. It's always about putting stigma on different marginalized communities, but we're really not getting to the root of the problem or really talking about it. It's just kind of a lot of lip service that equates to a lot of nothing.
Mhm.
So where do you see this really going with an appeal? Let me ask something, and I'm sorry, I might sound very naive to you. With this appeals court now, like, is there a time frame with that, or no? You have to wait for them. Like, how does that happen?
You just have to wait for them. Now that it's fully briefed, they could make a decision in 2 months. They could make a decision in 6 or 7 months. It just depends. They may hold arguments on oral arguments on the briefs that we've submitted. So we'll see what happens. It's hard to say exactly what the time frame is likely to be, but they would either reverse the decision and say that the district court got it wrong, or they would affirm it. So we obviously hope for reversal, and we think we're on very strong ground for that because there are hardly any cases of trafficking survivors being denied this protection, and even the district court in a different decision granted the protection to a woman who'd been in a brothel who wasn't even claiming to have been trafficked. It was an employment type of claim, and the court said, yep, this person is vulnerable to sex buyers trying to track her down. This person is in a very stigmatized situation having been in a brothel. That's enough for the protection. So in our case, we had even more supporting protection, and the judge said no. So we think it's very likely to be reversed, and we're hopeful that that will happen.
Good, because totally different animal, but I'm getting gray hair waiting. It's Congress, so it's a whole different thing, not legal. Waiting on COSA, Kids Online Safety Act. I'm just plugging away on that. I know it's different, but it's like, what is everybody waiting for with that?
Yes.
Let me ask you something. How do you respond? Do you get any? Have you had any kind of? You mentioned a little bit, but obviously because it's going to the appeals court. But do you get ever? Are there any kind of like ever debates on this? Do you get any pushback from anybody else about some of the things, some of your work you're doing? Because I'm always getting pushback, and again, I'm not a lawyer. So how do you respond to any pushback on the declaration, other than you provided the facts already, right, to the court?
Yes.
But how does that like sort of play out, the whole thing?
We haven't really gotten any pushback other than from the defendants themselves, of course, on the issue of pseudonymity. We've gotten pushback before related to obviously being abolitionists when it comes to prostitution and supporting measures like the equality model to protect and keep people who are in prostitution from being criminalized in any way and to provide services for them. But then also on the other hand, to hold the sex buyers and the brothels and pimps and traffickers all accountable. So we definitely get pushback on that issue, but not really on the pseudonym. I honestly don't think it's that controversial. I think that
Right.
in this case, we had some defendants who were pretty bent on threatening the Jane Doe and saying things like, the public has a right to determine her credibility, which is absurd. No, that's not a thing in litigation. Maybe at a jury trial if it comes to that, but not at any point before. And saying things like, if she's always a Jane Doe and then the case is dismissed, we're never going to know who we could bring a counterclaim against. And just like very overtly threatening stuff. There was a sex buyer who tried to find her and he filed a bunch of things with the court trying to enter the case. Like, they made it very clear that they wanted to retaliate, and the judge credited that instead of seeing it for the red flag that it was. I do think that this is a bit unusual, and so we haven't really gotten pushback on that.
Kristen, I'm always concerned with our public, our warriors. I make it a point. We always have to have a take action, a takeaway, resources. How can we get the public involved? How can we get them to help you? And NCOSE as a whole, what would you recommend about all of this?
Well, for the Nevada cases, because we actually have a couple that are ongoing right now, we have a webpage called notsafeforwomen.org where people can go and learn more and see the resources and take action. And then for NCOSE's main page, it's nsexualexploitation.org. And we also have an action center there where people can take different actions, for example, related to COSA and some of these other things we've talked about with big tech as well.
I like that. I'll link all of that in the body of the video. What do you want to finish us up with? Anything else that we need to know about and keep our warriors aware of? Because things are changing and happening every single day in this whole, anti-trafficking movement, lawsuits, big tech. It is really hard, Kristen, to keep up with everything. Anything else we should be aware of right now?
I think two things are coming to my mind right now. One is that no survivor should ever have to choose between safety for themselves and accountability for their abuser. And then also just that we have to all keep fighting.
That's why you are our legal warrior, Christen Price. Again, the website warriors and sexualexploitation.org. Again, I'm linking everything in the body of the video so everyone can take their time, learn, resource page, read about what's happening. I want to thank you, Kristen. Always promise me you'll come back because you always provide calmness. Because I could lose my mind really over a lot of these things, right? But you're always, clarity, calmness, your conviction as well, your passion, unwavering commitment to protecting survivors that is without peer. This new declaration is more than just a document. It's a shield, a voice, and a line in the sand, I believe, for every person who has ever feared about speaking out. And your work at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation reminds us all that dignity, safety, and justice are not luxuries. They are rights. And giving this dedication to survivors gives them strength and helps our parents and guidance and speaking truth. So we want to say to you, I can't say enough. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for educating us at the Warriors. And Really, again, I have to say, you're a true legal warrior. Promise me you'll come back again soon. Thank you, Christen Price.
I absolutely will. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. We'll speak again soon.
All right. Bye-bye.